Hello, so this is gonna be the last video of this series, and I got the whole mix done, the whole mastering process done as well, and also all the sound effects. I think in the last video I didn't show me doing the sound effects. I can't properly remember, but just in case it didn't, here is the rundown of the effects. So what is this synth? Okay, it's this one. Hey, there is something wrong here. Oh yeah, no, there's nothing wrong. It's just that I thought that the drums were sounding a bit too loud, but it's because I also had the vocals, which were not made by the client, but I used my own things to just balance out everything in the mix. So the drums sound a bit too loud, but it's because there is room between the drums and the vocal. So basically the drums stay on top, vocals below, and then the instrumentals, the rest of the instrumental kind of around it. So that's why it sounded a bit off without the vocals. But it's, yeah, nothing worrisome, I guess. So where is this synth? Where the hell are you? You'd think that I was prepared before doing this video, but I haven't touched this project in like a few weeks. So oh well, yeah, this is the Scream synth, which is this one. So as you can see, I recreated this one from scratch. You can see it by this asterisk here. So this is not a preset that I found anywhere else, so I really couldn't even tell you where I found this. But we're gonna talk about how I made it, which is more interesting in my opinion. So when it comes to sound design, as I've already told you in the previous videos, I think, in my opinion, you should think of it as what is the sound in the original song doing, right? Unfortunately, I don't have the original song in my PC. I deleted it, so I can't really show you the back and forward like example between my recreation and the original one, but I believe that if you're here, you probably heard this song at least once. So the original song, the original synth, what was it trying to do? The way that I see it, it was just trying to have something confusing, more than so like something in the background. It was something loud that you can actually perceive, something that sounds like the alarm of a fucking industrial factory. I don't know, right? So based on that, something that sounds aggressive, something that sounds very sharp, I decided to go with a saw wave, which is the first oscillator here, and also this is called vital, I think. It's the same name of the soccer player, I guess. So I guess it's either vital or vital, I don't know. So yeah, this is a free plugin, by the way. I know it looks awesome and fancy, but it's free. So this is how it sounds in the beginning. It's just a saw wave that I have filtered. Maybe in the effects. Did I filter it in the effects? Yes, I did. So let's remove all the effects. Why do I hear reverb? Because it's going through my reverb chains. So yeah, this is it's the full sound of a saw wave. And then I decided to add some weird shit on top, which has a very low volume compared to the original one, which sounds like this. Originally, I have tried to add some LFO, which is basically low frequency oscillator. Basically, it's just automation, but made automatically. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but instead of you doing the manual automation and then blah 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 with your hands, you can just like do it once, and then it's gonna loop throughout the entire time you reproduce the sound, right? But I decided to tackle it, put it off, because it didn't really sound like the original one, and it didn't even sound pleasing. It didn't sound like it was doing anything at all. I mean, it sounded like it was doing something, but not something that I liked. So this this oscillator sounds a bit more, definitely more harsher than the first oscillator, which is why I have lowered down the volume. And also it's pitched 24 octaves, two octaves down. So 24 semitones, 24. It's not 24 semitones, it's 2,400 semitones, I guess. So 24 tones. Yeah. I added some unison and I've messed up with the phase and the modes of the unison and the phase until I got something that sounded dissonant. So I got the job done. And I have also added, this is not it, these two are not doing anything because these, you're supposed to drag them to the fingers here, to the knobs, for them to actually do something. But yeah, and then I also added some white noise in, I'd say in between, but white noise is on top, so yeah. Which you can't really hear, but when I turn it off and on, you can clearly hear that it sounds harsher with the white noise, which makes sense, right? And this is how I made this effect. And well, this synth in the effects chain, I was doing something like distorting it, so some overdrive, which should sound something like this. Just some overdrive distortion. Wave shaping, which is the same thing as distortion and also as compression, because compression and distortion are basically the same thing. The only difference that sets them apart is the timing value of it. So basically distortion is very fast compression, which explains why when you use compression with very fast attack and very fast release times, you get some clipping out of the audio you're trying to compress, because distortion and compression are the same thing. Just the time interval sets them apart. And this is just to get it to sound a bit louder and to approach the clip in a softer manner. And this is what it's gonna sound like. Can you show up? And I also added some filtering, because you don't need the low end, and also the highest hand, you don't need it. And you get this, and you run it through some reverb and delay, and you get this, which probably sounds very close to the original one. Then what are the other? If you're wondering about this is just some distortion that I was trying, like some puddles that I was trying from waves, but I didn't really need nor like the sound that it was making. Also, what is this one? Who are you? 21. 21, it's you. Okay, where the hell are you? Oh, it's you. Which is still the same one. No, it's the first one that I was trying to tell you about. Actually, this one I wanted to, well, in my mind before I loaded up this project again, I wanted to actually show off this one, this specific sound, because it's the prime example of something that sounds close to the original one, but sounds exactly like the feeling that it was trying to get, the feeling that the original sound was trying to get out of you, right? This is something in the background, something harsh, but that is distinguishable. And I can't show you the back and forth because I've deleted the actual song. So yeah, well, fuck me, I guess. There's nothing going on here. It's just some distortion and some amp. So it's running through a guitar amp basically. And this is Citrus, which comes off from the FL Studio. This is native of FL Studio. And this is, I believe it's not a preset, or is it? Can you see if it's a preset or something? No, you can't really see it. Well, anyway, these are the things that I have made. So it's basically just one oscillator, and there is no FM or R amp going on because I didn't really need it. And it's just waves and some filters and some effects. Really, there is nothing more to it. Actually, I have removed all the effects because otherwise it sounded like this, which I don't need the reverb. I like to blend my own reverbs. So yeah, what other? Where are you? Where are you playing? Fuck. Okay, you're playing over here. Oh, so these are all the layers, I guess. These are really just random fillers, I guess. This is the same as the main one. And these are the strings. Yeah. I've actually bought this library from Contact because I needed some professional strings, because up until that point, which was like 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago, I was using the Sonatina samples, which are free strings, but they sound so bad. And when you're using strings, you really need the highest quality strings that you can find. And these were like on sales for $50, I believe. And at that point, I was like, yeah, well, I might as well just try them out. And they're good, but not as good as I would like, I guess. And also there is some errors going with the key switches. So you're gonna have to get lucky for them to actually work properly, which I'm not gonna sit here and explain to you what I mean by that, but just if you need something that sounds better than what you're using, if it's something free that you're using, then these will get the job done, but I don't really recommend them. So, because I think that nowadays you can actually rent, or rather than rent, you can use the whatever, what's the name? Well, whatever. If you know about strings, you probably heard of the plugin of the library, and you probably know already what I'm talking about. You can actually use those ones for every month, and you can pay them. Like you can basically get a high quality strings library for like a price of a Netflix. Basically, I think it's around. Is Netflix $10? Or $20? Well, I mean something around that ballpark, I guess, every month. So you can get a subscription and you're done. So keep your $50 and don't use it on this shit library. Pianos or whatever, really just get a piano that sounds soft and you're done. Strings layer, this is a string layer from Nexus. This is the pad, a random pad from Nexus, and for the pad, you want something that sounds soft because the original one sounded soft, and I don't really recommend you trying to recreate the sound of a pad, right? Because pads are mostly in the background, and especially in the sound, there are like the clean guitars, the bass, the vocals, the drums, and the pad. So hearing the actual proper sound of the pad is something very impossible for you to do so. And besides that, the more famous your client is, the more they will have to do to deal with like copyright issues, because everybody wants money everybody wants money, right? So you focusing on recreating accurately the sounds of a song is going to be counterproductive in the long run. Because, well, if you're trying to create your own originals, then why are you trying, like, what's the use? Unless, like, you could make a point that it's some teaching tool, but this is something very hard to do, to recreate properly, like, accurately a sound. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to bash this way of doing it, because I've done it also before. Like there is this track from the anime movie, I forget the name, Weathering With You, that I made, that the same sounds exactly the same, because that was an easy scene for me to recreate, and I did it. Or a few other songs which I'm not gonna name because, like, yeah, whatever. Like the organ from On My One Machine Data, that track, I have recreated it perfectly, but I had to change it. And yeah, so like, there's nothing wrong with trying to recreate a sound 100% accurately, but there is really no need for it, right? Because you're gonna find no use for it, because your clients are gonna tell you, yo, bro, like, this sounds way exactly like the original one, and I'm asking you to make a cover, so I don't need something that sounds exactly the same. Otherwise, it's going to be harder for them to contest the copyright claims and whatnot. So, yeah, it's better for you to not focus on this route and instead choose the what is this sound trying to accomplish route. And this pad is something soft and indistinguishable that you hear in the background. Let me see if I can find it in this mess of a mixer track. Where the hell is the pad? Oh, I had it selected already. Lol. Yeah. It's just been filtered. That's it. Already there is nothing else going on. It's just a random pad that I found that sounded soft, and I just filtered it and added some reverb and delay. Also, as you can see, I'm using the same reverb and delay channels for everything. Sometimes I use a different reverb for the snare or for some particular effect. And I think in this case, I'm also routing the snare. No, never mind. I'm just routing the snare to this reverb. But sometimes if you want the snare to sound like you basically get a different kind of sound when you have two different reverbs going on in your mix. So something that has the specific space of that one reverb, while other instruments have another kind of reverb. It can get messy, so it's something that I suggest you to experiment with, but sometimes it will actually get the perfect mix down like that. But in some other cases, you don't need it to. And if you're using the same reverb and delay, it helps to get everything kind of glued together better, because they all have the same space. They all they all have the same reverb and delay, right? So it helps to get everything kind of glued together. Otherwise, you're free to experiment however you want. So, speaking of experimentation, guitars. Where are my main guitars? I think this is the lead guitar. Well, whatever. Guitars are lead guitar, whatever. So, for the guitars, when you record the guitars DIY, well, that actually also works as a sentence, but what I meant to say is DI, so direct input. So you take your guitar, your instrument cable, and you plug it in your audio interface and hit the record button. So you're just gonna get the raw sound of the guitar. What you will do about giving it a tone and to match the tone of the original one, you guessed it, you're gonna go by kind of feeling. Does it sound heavy? Does it sound more like it's a rock song? Does it sound like it was made in the 80s? Or does it sound like it's death metal heavy, right? So, but for guitars, this is a bit more complicated, because the amount of tones that you can make for a guitar is incredibly vast. So, and there is mainly one reason why, besides like guitar and like pickups, whatever, that's not really as important as the cabinet or the cabin cone, because it's like a speaker cone inside a casing, and that's called a cabinet, right? That's the thing that's gonna give you the most versatility in guitar tones. That and mic positions. So, and there is really like a gazillion different tones that you can make out of a single cabinet. But in the age of the internet, you can find those cabinets for free, and also you can find some amp simulation for free. The main ones that I always use is, except in this case, is always like the Lepoulin stuff. So Lepoul, Lepoul. So if I remember, I'm gonna leave a link in the description, which I most likely will forget, but in case you will remind me in the comments if you really need to see what I'm talking about, or if you are curious, I guess. And those that guy made simulation and guitar cabinet simulation for free. And basically what a cabinet simulation is, it's a very short sine wave sweep. So a sine wave going from the lowest note to the lowest hertz possible. Actually, sometimes, in most cases, it's from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And it's basically rising up like a siren in a very short manner, like in milliseconds. I'm talking about milliseconds here. that wave is getting then filtered because a cone or a cabinet or a cone, it's the same thing as I've already said. Basically, what it really is, it's a highly specific and concentrated filter. So this is a low pass filter, this is a band pass filter. This is really not a filter, it's just some volume, lowering down the volume of the mid frequencies, but these two are filters, right? And if you want to see some other type of filters, you have the band pass, which is basically a combination of low pass and high pass. You also have where is the stop? Yeah, you also have a band stop and whatnot. You can have a lot of let's just disable you. You can have a lot of like filters and a cabinet, a cone, a speaker is basically a very sophisticated filter. So that then that sine wave impulse is getting ran through this highly specific filter, which is usually recreated after the model of the cabinet of a specific cone, usually by some reamping and stuff, but whatever. And yeah, that's how you make impulses for guitars. That's kind of similar, and also how you make impulses for like reverbs and stuff. Although that's kind of different, but there's some similarities in between these two. And you run these impulses with an impulse loader, which conveniently Les Paul also made some. There are also a few free ones, like I think not Ignite made only an amp simulation plugin. I don't remember them. No, I think they made also a impulse loader plugin. Or you can use some like Amplitude stuff that have everything together. There is also Helix. That's pretty famous, or at least it used to be a few years ago. Now I don't really follow the old VST community anymore, because I really don't need any more VSTs. So if you use those kinds of plugins, they have everything built in for you. But if you want to make a guitar tone from scratch, then you have to build a proper chain, which goes like amp and cabinet. You can also have EQ before this distortion, so before the amp, which has the biggest impact on the kind of distortion that you're gonna get, because you can think of it like think of it as, let's open another equalizer. So think of it, this is your entire spectrum of sound that you're trying to distort, right? It goes from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, right? All of these is gonna get distorted, especially the ones that the parts that sound the loudest. They are gonna get hit by the distortion first, same as compression. So yeah, the loudest ones are gonna get hit by the distortion before the quieter ones, right? So, but think of it as as pink noise. So every harmonic is at the same volume, right? If you filter out some frequencies, this is gonna sound different than, let's say, this, or even this, when it's getting hit by a distortion or even by some compression, which, as I've said before, they are kind of the same. Well, they are literally the same, right? So applying EQ before distortion is gonna give you more impactful designs, or other sounds, than let's say EQ after distortion, because after you're getting distorted, there is really nothing wave shaping the sound, right? So whatever you got after the distortion, that's gonna remain it. It's still gonna sound like that, but filtered if you decide to apply some EQ after it. But if you apply it before the distortion, you're kind of changing the wave shaping tool itself, which is kind of counterintuitive to think about a plugin put before a wave shaper. It's gonna change the way this wave shaper that's put after in the chain, it's gonna change it, how it's gonna behave. So yeah, well, but that is what it is. So speaking of sounds, I think that's about it. So let's talk about mixing, which is my favorite part about a project. Really, this is the most tedious stuff, which, that's not what you should be doing. So this is the most tedious part for me, like getting the MIDI out and everything. If you're wondering about these, this is just a white noise. What else do I have here? Oh, these are just some guitar noises that I made. These are some snare layers, because the snare sounds a bit more metallic in some parts of the song. I think all of these three are going through the same mixer channel. Yes, they are. Yeah, it sounds more metallic than the verses, or at least to my ears, it sounds more metallic in certain parts, so I layered it. So don't worry about these. These are just really random snare samples that you find, and you're just gonna add some distortion and EQ, and you're gonna get the metallic snare sound. Also, you're gonna boost the high mid frequencies, these ones, and well, in this case, I removed some because it sounded way too harsh. But as you can see by the waveform, this is what I was trying to get. I'm more focused on this, like, part of the spectrum snare sound. But this is too much. Yeah, so shut up. So yeah, don't worry about any of these. These are very simple and whatnot. These are other guitar recordings and whatnot. So mixing. When it comes to mixing, yeah, of course. When it comes to mixing, I always start with the drums, which is also what I start with when I recreate a song. I always start with the MIDI of the drums. So mixing drums. I probably shouldn't go about every detail in this video, so I should probably only focus about what I decided to go for in this particular song. But the general gist of it is, like, in mixing in general, if you can understand EQ and compression, you can mix basically any kind of song. Really, I'm not joking. Any kind of genre. But the trick is learning EQ, which is kind of tricky. And because I bet that a lot of you didn't know that EQ has that kind of effect before distortion, right? That's also what I mean about learning EQ, like understanding EQ. I also mean that. But the trickiest part in mixing ever, and no doubts about it, is compression. Like, I'm willing to bet both of my hands that at least all of you at least once were confused when talking about compression. Where are you? Here, a wave shaper. So some kind of compression that's doing close to nothing, just some volume boost. So this is sound designing. This is it uses sound designing. I didn't like how it sounded. I wanted to sound more mellow, but it sounded way too clicky in my opinion, and it didn't really fit the sound of this track because the original one didn't have a click kick. So I just removed all all the mids and the sum of the highs, and I'm left with this. Well, oh, don't worry about this. Yeah, this is the original sound, so it sounds more mellow. This is the wave shaper. It sounds more like louder, I guess. Well, yeah, I mean, I should say that before you do anything, you just volume bounce everything. But that's also difficult, because when you play compression, you lower the volume and don't listen to people that tell you that compression, it's gonna decrease the loudest peak and increase the lowest peaks of a sound, because that's not the effect of compression. Like, even like linguistically speaking, that makes no sense. How can you increase something when you're compressing it? The effect of compression is to take something. Do I have a compression here? Yes, I do. This is my compressor. The effect of compression is only to reduce the volume of something. You can also use it to sound design, but this is not the video talking about sound design, or at least not really in this manner. But the effect of compression is to decrease the volume of something above a certain point that you decide with the threshold. So let's zoom in. Okay, so this blue line here is the threshold that you set with your ears and also your eyes, because this plugin you can see the actual waveform. Now, you may wonder, why did you set your threshold here and not here? What's changing in the waveform between this point and let's say this point? Absolutely nothing. I just set it kind of arbitrarily because of the kick wave shape. It's something very sharp, really. If you play a threshold here, all you're doing is basically increasing the amount of thing that's gonna get compressed. So it's gonna get, so to hear it more, you're gonna have to increase the ratio. And also, yeah, it's just changing the volume. It's not doing anything else. But in some instances, like in vocals, you can use like side compression. No, I mean, not side compression. I mean, what's the name? I forget. It's not parallel. It's, well, I think, yeah, it's side compression. Yeah, it's side compression. It's chained. So, yeah, you can use like different compressions, different compressors of one after another, each doing something different. So for like, let's say this is a vocal track, you can have the first compressor just cutting the loudest syllables. So you just have a very high threshold that only the loudest syllable are gonna get compressed. So everything above this threshold, so usually something like this, and these are the loudest syllables, like let's say on a vocal, right? And then you're gonna play really like a high ratio, high knee, whatever you got, to just make sure you got all these syllables down. And then you can apply some other compressor to do different kind of things. So compression, as you can see, this is the rumble of the kick right here, the lowest part. You can kind of hear it. I applied also a gate to remove more of the rumble, but don't worry about it, because I wanted a sharp kick. I didn't want a kick that also had a bit of rumble below it. So I set a threshold and I set a ratio. Usually, I'm gonna give you a tip for drums like kicks, snare, toms. The ratio, the standard ratio, quote unquote standard, is 6:1. The ratio is basically how loud the signal has to be to have the same volume that it had before the compression. So basically it had to be 6 times as loud for these parts above the threshold to be as loud as they are now. So I'm compressing them 6 times, 6 folds, as you may say. These are the 2 most important things about the compressor, the threshold and the ratio. Without these 2, you have no compression. If you have your threshold set all the way here, you have no compression. Basically, you're not compressing anything really, as you can even see, right? So what sets apart compression to distortion? That's a question, by the way. And if you answer time, or something along those lines, then you're right. These are the time knobs: attack, release, and sustain. Sustain is something in between attack and release. I don't know why they put it all the way over here, but just don't worry about sustain. Sustain is useless. The most important ones are attack and release. Attack is a kind of delay. It's basically exactly a delay before the compressor kicks in. So this plugin, this plugin receives an input at this time. When you press play, right, it receives an input, and the attack is telling the compressor, so the plugin, to use these settings, so to compress this volume at this threshold by this amount of the ratio after 9.63 milliseconds, which you can see up here when I hover over the attack knob. You can see the 9.63 milliseconds. So it's basically giving a compressor a delay. What does it do in terms of sound? What it's doing, it's basically making it sound punchier. In the waveform, it's gonna look like a quick transient. A transient is the beginning of the waveform. It's the very beginning. A quick transient, something like this kick originally. And I mean, a kick and snare is going to be always sharp by default, because all they are is basically a sine wave dropping in pitch and in volume very fast, very quickly. That's basically a kick. Then you also layer on top some like white noise, some other shit on top to make it sound more interesting. But the core of it is basically just a sine wave, low pitched sine wave that's dropping both in volume and in pitch down very quickly. I can demonstrate it, but you can open your door yourself and prove me wrong. So yeah, basically, so it's by default a quick transient. But what I'm doing by the attack and compression in general is making this quick transient quicker, so you can hear the difference. It sounds like it's punching you in the chest. I was about to say stomach for some reason, and I'm mixing chest also with stomach, and it sounded like I was saying something else. Well, anyway, it's hitting you more in the chest, right? It's not leaving you room for breathing, and that's what you want with the kick and the snare. With the toms, it's something different. Maybe you want the toms to also be as sharp as the kick and the snare, or maybe you want them to be more in the background, which you guessed it, you do it by the reverse. So you lower the attack, but if you lower the attack and you also lower the release, you're going to get a distorted kind of sound. So you're going to increase the release. You can think of it like this, but you can also think of it more of a nerdy way. Why do you have to increase the release? Like, what's physically limiting you? What's physically making it distorting? Because a kick or a tom, or even a snare for all that matters, something that's short, that's low pitched, has a very long wavelength. So for the compressor to hit the entire wavelength, it's gonna have to be active. The compressor has to be active for it, the entire wavelength, right? If it's way faster than the wavelength, it's gonna get distorted. That's why you can work with very fast time, compressor time for like hi-hats or even like vocals. But for something like a kick or toms, they're gonna get distorted. I told you to fuck off. Release is basically up until the compressor starts to work. That's the attack, right? So the delay between the sound that starts and the compressor actually compressing the sound. The release is towards the end of this compressor, like after the compressor has done its job. How long do you want this job to be made for, right? It's kind of tricky to explain. It's also kind of tricky to understand. So it's tricky for both for you and me, buddy. So let's try to prove it to you with an audio example. I'm gonna exaggerate the compression so that you can hear it better. This compression, what's doing if you with all the release up, it's basically like it's gonna have the highest volume as the start, then it's gonna decrease by the amount that you set in the ratio. It's gonna decrease and then it's gonna stay like that until the audio decays, right? So the waveform is gonna look like this: bloop, bloop, bloop. So something like this. I'm not sure if you can actually properly do it. If I cared enough, I would actually add some positive effecting, some post-processing effecting to actually show you like better, like with some like paint stuff and what. Let's open a paint. So yeah, it's gonna look like this. So yeah, let's change the color. Fuck me. Do you not, are you not like work Photoshop where if I press Alt or Shift, they do a perfect line? No. So these lines are as perfect as I can make it. So yeah, this is the compression, this is the amplitude, this is the time. So A and T, or B for volume, I guess, but T for time. This is a T, by the way. And this is what's gonna look like. Well, it's gonna look like this basically. So let's erase this part. So it's gonna look like this. So it's gonna be at its highest volume at the start, then it's gonna decrease by the amount of by the ratio. This is the ratio that determines how big this compression is, and this thing right here is the release. And this is the ratio. And this is the attack, I guess. This is the attack. Attack, ATK. Attack damage curry. The sustain is between these two, right? So yeah, don't worry about sustain. It's kind of useless. You're not gonna ever use it, probably, like almost ever. I bet that most of you are never gonna find a use for sustain. So these sounds exactly like this. It sounds more mellow. I'd say it sounds like it's gonna be buried in the mix, but so it sounds something. It sounds like a kick for an EDM soft song that's only like a low rumble that you're gonna hear just to have some kind of presence in the low end. I can't think of any song right now at the top of my head. Maybe some songs from, or rather by, what's that girl name? The girl that made the song for Vinland Saga, the first season. What's that girl's name? Well, she has a few songs where she uses this low rumble kick that doesn't sound present, but it sounds more in the background, and you achieve that kind of effect like this. And also with lowering the attack and the volume of the kick. You can hear it's already distorting. Anyway. And with the release off, you guessed it, it's gonna look like, let's delete all of these, I guess. Also you, I don't like you. I also don't like you. I don't like anybody. With the, you are way too thin, my friend. You should eat more. With the attack, with the release down, it's gonna sound like this. I'm not joking. It's a sharp triangle. You're not gonna see it here because here it's just the pre-effect. But trust me, it's gonna look more or something like this with the release down, because as you said before, as you saw before, this is the ratio. I mean, this is the release, right? It's in time. So if this thing equals 0, then this fucking thing can never be as long as if it were to look to equal 100, right? So it's basically gonna look like this. Logically, it makes sense, right? And also when it comes to sound, it makes sense because this fucking triangle, this pike, is gonna stab you in your chest, right? So while this thing is not gonna stab you, I mean, it can poke you in the chest, but it's not gonna, right? Look at it, just look at it. How is this gonna kill you? But these can bleed you to death, make you bleed to death, right? This whole thing, if you get this whole thing stopped in your chest, good luck surviving it. So that's not the sound that I want to make. So yeah, that's exactly the sound that I wanted to make. Do I have you set? Yes. And you decrease the threshold until you find something that you like. And this is the first compressor. I also have another compressor from Waves. That's not from Waves. This is from Waves. Oh, that's fucking close here. These are free plugins, by the way. That's why they look messy, because they're free, of course. And these are from the Melda production. I was about to say something like, you can find the name somewhere here, and I found it. It's here, Melda production audio. So yeah, they work just fine, but they're free, so they're messy. And this is from Waves. This is my favorite compressor. If you're gonna have to buy something from Waves, please buy this API 2500 stereo compressor. And it doesn't really matter if it's mono or stereo. I mean, it does. It's better if you buy the stereo one. I think if you buy one, you're gonna get both. But if I'm mistaken, just buy the stereo, because you're gonna have this knob over here to make it mono. But you cannot make something mono stereo. You can only make something stereo mono. So yeah, close. And what do you see here? Besides this analog is just white noise. Don't worry about it. So threshold, attack, ratio, release. As you can see, you cannot find any sustain, because sustain is fucking useless. So threshold. In the minus, in the plus, it's expansion. It's not compression. It's the opposite of compression, but you're never gonna use expansion. So just focus about the minus here. Always about the minus. Attack, fast attack, the same thing that I had here, but the threshold is a bit lower in this thingy here, in fact. you get the same sound that you were getting here, which basically here there is no reason for me to use this one, really zero reason at all, because this one doesn't have different syllables by poking through randomly. That's what you do in vocals when you're trying to get everything leveled, and you only use one compressor because you're still gonna have those random syllables peeking through. So you're gonna use different compressor each for its purpose. This one, there is really, in the case of the kick, there is really no reason for me to do this. I think it did this because I was thinking ahead when I was making this video, and I wanted to use this compressor because this compressor is fucking the bomb, because you can see everything, right? Not everything. It would be the bombest if you could actually see the difference it makes, but you can't, so you cannot hear it. Anyway, this compressor but sounds so fucking clean and good, and it's the best. Just apply this compressor anywhere and it's gonna make it sound good, I promise. Yeah, this is the settings. Low, very fast release, the slowest attack it has, ratio 6:1. That's really nothing else to explain. I already explained everything about compression. When people tell you that it also increases the volume of the lowest part, so of the rumble, yes, you can hear the rumble because I increased the volume afterwards. Afterwards, I have increased the volume. This plugin already does it by itself, I guess. Yeah, it does. This is the knob for the volume, but it's at 0. So the only logical conclusion is that this plugin increases the volume by itself. Some plugins do that, especially the compressors that only have 2 knobs, the input and output. Those ones have a set threshold, attack and release that you cannot change. But the way those plugins work is that you adjust the input until it reaches a certain threshold, and then the output to adjust the volume after the compression. So yeah, that's it. But compression, the effect of compression does not increase the volume of anything. It only decreases the volume. And believe me, if you're going to study compression on YouTube, you're going to find so many fucking tutorials of guys telling you that compression decreases and increases the volume of the loudest and the quietest, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't. It just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work like that. How complicated really this compressor have to be for it to detect the lowest part and increase that volume and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't make sense. You just increase the volume afterwards. That's why it sounds louder. Even the lower parts sound louder, because you're just going to bring everything down to the same level approximately, right? So you're bringing this kick, this thing that was like this, you're bringing it down to be like this. To be like this. Well, to be like this, right? So imagine if you had attack and release at 0. This thing would become something like this. Let's change color. It will become something like this at 0, and then like this. Let's add something like this, right? Like some vocals. And here the singer went out of breath, right? The compressor is gonna, if you set the threshold here to everything to equal the threshold, if you set the threshold here, let's make the threshold blue, so that you can equal everything to the lower sound, and you're going to put the ratio to 20:1. The volume, the thing is going to sound like this. But this part right here is untouched. There is no way you can touch this part. You're not making this one louder. You're just bringing everything down, and then this whole thing, you're just going to increase the volume with the knob, with the volume knob afterwards. Like, this is the pre one, but you can go in the mixer and fucking increase this lever, this knob. This is not a knob, it's more like a lever. You can increase this one. You can use another plugin and increase the fucking volume up afterwards. That's compressed. That's why it's gonna increase the lowest part, the it's gonna make the lower part sound louder, but compression doesn't do that. And that's a very big pet peeve of mine, if you couldn't figure out by the way I'm talking about it. So snare and kick, basically the same compression. Also for the toms, overheads, it's faster. So it's faster attack, slower release, because I want everything to be limited. I want the overheads to have the same amount of volume, which you cannot hear because they are muted, and also because they are not playing. So if I am hitting a bunch of crashes all at once, I mean throughout the time, like I'm hitting the snare, or like I'm hitting the hi-hat, I want these to be at the same volume. So I'm just using, I forgot the ratio. Yeah. So I'm compressing everything. Wait. Okay, I thought that it gave also visuals after the compression, but it doesn't. So yeah, that's why I have the release set very slow. So I want the compressor to activate instantly and then last forever, basically. Now, pros will time this release with the time that it takes for this crash to be repeated, so that it only is active for the entire time that this crash is active, and it doesn't overlap. Because if it overlaps, sometimes it can create some like squishy noises, but it's very rare that it's gonna do that. And also it's way too time consuming to time these and then automate the different kind of compressors, because maybe these things play a different patterns, so they play more or less rhythmically throughout the entire song. So you're gonna have to have more compressors and automate between each one of those, whatnot, but whatever. So yeah, that's a technique that usually pros do sometimes, very rarely, I guess, but don't worry about the release. If it's overlapping in milliseconds, don't worry. Or in seconds. Usually it doesn't, it's never the case, because let me look at this. The slowest release is 2000 milliseconds, so 2 seconds. Are you really gonna play something rhythmical every 2 seconds? Every 2 seconds? Maybe, yes, maybe not. So yeah, you are to decide. Yeah, rooms are very squashed. As you can see, ratio is very high. When you go about 10:1 ratio, you're talking about limiting, because when the sun shines, will shine together. Told you I'd be here forever. Because when you said like 10:1, this is like, think of it as a 1, not a 2. I totally didn't fuck it up. And this is 2. They're the same, right? Whatever. Yeah. 20:1. And I mean 10:1 and 20:1. They basically just limit the signal. They just do something like this and flatten it out, and it looks like a sausage. That's also why sausage flattener is a thing. It's a plugin, because it's like a limiter, and it makes everything look like a sausage because it's limiting. Also, that's why dubstep music sounds like looks like a sausage when you put it in the DAW, or like in Audacity, whatever, which is also a DAW, by the way. It looks like a sausage. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's like just a square, because in the master they have limited everything. And yeah, so in the room mics, I also distorted them a bit. They are also running through nothing. Never mind, they're not running through anything. This is the bus. I just limited the bus. The trick that I like to use is a trick that I discovered a few years ago by some guy that's a pro at mixing metal music, and it was like, set the threshold until the compressor is getting reduced by 4 dB. So around 4 dBs of volume reduction when the snare hits. And yeah, but you want to know my trick? Lower it down until it sounds good. If it sounds too bad, so basically you lower it down until it sounds bad, from that point, you just increase you turn it up, basically. Already here it sounds too squashy, too squashed, to everything that's like squash and gives you the same feeling that any kind of word with squash may give you. And so here, this is too much of that. Yeah, that's how I set a limiter for the drums, really. With time and experience, you're gonna get good at it. You're also gonna be able to hear things better. It just takes time and practice, and especially you have to focus on learning compression, how compressors change the sound of things, and also if you're a vocalist, by the way, special tip, if you're a vocalist and you're making your own covers and you're mixing your own vocals, please keep in mind that this is a tool to blend things. If you have too much reverb in your vocals, they sound very bad. They sound extremely washy. Also, remove the low hand from your vocals in the reverb. The reverb is supposed to be like a band filter, so it doesn't have to have too many high frequencies being reverberated, and also the lowest frequencies do not have to be reverberated. Otherwise, you're going to create a lot of hissing for the higher hand and a lot of rumbling for the lower hand, and it's going to sound like shit. Trust me. And also, this knob right here is your friend. Don't set it all the way to 100. The reverb in your vocals has to be subtle, unless it's for some special effect that you're trying to achieve. But if you're just trying to blend the vocals in the mix, it has to be subtle, okay? It cannot be the main focus of the song, the vocal of your the reverb of your vocals. Just a pro tip. Toms, they are basically the same chain of drums and of the snare and the kick. The snare bottom is basically the same as the snare top. It's just been filtered because it sounds more papery. The bottom part of the snare is basically literally the bottom part of the snare. You put a microphone below the snare, the top one on top of it, and on the bottom part, it sounds like you're tearing up a paper, I guess. Like, listen to it. Here it sounds a bit metallic because that's also the sound of the snare, which I've also filtered kind of here. So, yeah. And these two together like compensate one for each other. Like love. Unless you're polyamorous, I guess. Bass, what are these two? Okay, they're nothing. Reverb, they are absolutely nothing. Bass. For the bass, tone goes about the same as the guitars, whatever. For the bass, you want to cut the sub frequencies. Also for the kick, by the way, because this is where the kick lives, right? And the bass doesn't really live in the sub frequency. It kind of does, but what I like to do is also add a sub separate to the bass. This technique I've only seen it done in dubstep music, separating the bass from the sub. And when you look at it in a master, it's very easy to distinguish because of the gap between the first harmonic in the sub and the octave above it. If there is a clean gap, it means the sub and the bass were separated. If there are some like random frequencies, or if one or the other sounds looks fatter than the other one, it's not really about volume, but it's a good indicator of sub and bass not being separated in a mix, which can lead to more. What the fuck is this? Which can lead to more crumbly mixes if they're not separated, because kick basses and a sub live all in this region. They all live here, and if you put 3 mates in a room and nobody has their own space, what do you think is gonna happen? All the chaos. So you have to give each one some space. So the bass doesn't need the kitchen. You can heat at PC like all of us nerds. So no kitchen for the bass. The sub, meanwhile, is like the mother of the 3 and only lives in the kitchen. So just the sub is gonna only have the kitchen, and it's not gonna be allowed to be anywhere else in the house. The kick is like a kid that goes every fucking where and leaves a mess everywhere. So you always have to leave space for the kid, because kids are always first to everything. They always have the priority. So when you make food, you always cook first for the kid, unless you're a bad parent. So you achieve that with sidechain. So you give priority to the kid with sidechain. So when you make food for the kid and you want to give the food to the kid first, you're gonna set the kick to the kitchen, the sub frequencies, and you're gonna sidechain these two. So it's basically a compressor. It's basically a compression. But the trick is that it only gets activated according to the kick. Only when the kick plays and how the kick is, basically. So if the kick was a constant sound, this would constantly get compressed. But since a kick is not a constant sound, this only gets compressed when the kick is playing. And it's getting compressed, as you can see over here. I can actually solo the kick and the sub for you. I'm not sure you can hear the sub, by the way. I can, but just because I can doesn't mean that actually in the recording and for YouTube you can. But anyway, when the kick plays, just in case you can't hear me when it's playing, when the kick plays, you can see that the volume is getting ducked. So there is nobody in the kitchen when the kid is there, I guess. Yeah, so we already figured out that this nerd doesn't live in the kitchen. He's by the PC, so he doesn't need the fucking kitchen. And yeah, so the kitchen has space for everybody, but as priority for the kid. I really cannot explain that in any other more simpler way, I guess. The English, whatever it may be, whatever English may be, whatever. Themes and shit, they all share one similarity, which is like you shouldn't give too many fucks about them. Just lower the mid frequencies, because they shouldn't live in the mid frequencies. That's only space for vocals. They should be as contour to the vocals. So don't give them the leading part. So just decrease the mix. They decrease the mids in the EQ. Of course, cut everything below things that you don't need. So all the low end, cut it. Strings, the same thing. Wait. That's not something that you were supposed to say. Yeah, cut the mid, cut everything that you don't need, and just adjust everything else according to your taste buds. Yes, taste buds. Yes, that's what you use to mix. Also, effects and basically they are the same. They are all part of one family, which is the I don't give a fuck family. And you should just decrease the volume, apply some reverb, some general reverb to all of these, and remove the mids and the low end. I mean, not remove totally the mids, but just cut a bit the mids and remove in the entirety of the low end that you do not need. And just then adjust the volume accordingly. So guitars, just pan one left and one right, make sure they sound different, either by tone or by recording, because otherwise you're going to get a big stereo, which is like, a big mono, which is basically when you put a guitar, the same signal, the same kind of guitar that you recorded once, you duplicate it, put it one left and one right. It's basically just a fucking mono. You just put it twice of one thing. So you're just doubling its volume because you're putting one left and one right. You're just creating a big mono. I'm not sure if you can actually understand that, if I'm explaining myself properly. You, instead of having one mono thing, let's see. I probably can just Alt Control A and cons. Yes. So instead of view, so this is the guitar recording, right? And it's gonna have this. This is the volume rack. This is left and this is right. And it's gonna sound like this. No, green. It's green. It's gonna sound like this, right? Where are you? But if you take the same thing and duplicate it, whatnot. Let's actually duplicate it. And put it one left and one right. This that had the volume according the number. Yeah, whatever English is, whatever. It's just an opinion in English. Let's assign this wavelength the volume of 30 decibels. dB. What the fuck am I doing? dB. Fuck me, dB. So this is also 30 dB. Whatever. If this is running mono and not, fuck me, and not stereo, this is gonna equal 30 dB. dB. Right, makes sense. Everything is logical. It doesn't require too much brain power, but for me it does, because I can't properly speak or understand anything. But if you put these two things, how can I make you bigger? How can I get a bigger eraser? Size matters, kids. Don't let people tell you otherwise. Yeah, whatever. If you put this one in mono, so you duplicated it, pan it left, and the other duplicated file right, they're still going to be 30 dB. 30 dB, it's the same exact thing. The equal is just going to be 60 dB, but it's going to still look like this, right? Just higher in volume, because it's been separated in left and right. So it's just the same thing twice. So it's going to have higher volume, but it's still going to look like it's mono. So this is completely useless for you to do. So just record another wavelength, guitar track that's gonna look something like blah 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 blah. Something like this. You're playing the same notes, same chords, same brief, same whatever, but they look different because they are two different takes, so you're not gonna physically be able to play them exactly the same twice in a row or twice in your entire lifetime. Since they're gonna look different, they're gonna sound different, they're gonna be planned one left to right, the signal is now no longer look mono, it's gonna look something like this, and it's always gonna bounce. The left one is gonna be higher in 1 millisecond, then the right one is gonna be higher in volume compared to the left one in the next millisecond, and so on. When you get something like that, you achieve the good stereo. If you want to talk about perfect stereo, then you're gonna have to look at the phase. This is the spectrum, the stereo spectrum field. Stereo spectrum field, yes. The stereo field for everything in phase and everything anti-phase. Anti-phase is basically the opposite of phase. So when your mix is entirely based on the anti-phase zone, it's basically phase cancellating itself. So when you listen to this mix in mono, it's gonna sound like shit. All of this is gonna be translated to, it's gonna sound like shit in mono. Also like shit in stereo, but especially shit in mono. So if you're listening to it with one speaker, like if you're only wearing one Bluetooth AirPod, whatever they're called these days, or if you're listening to it through your telephone, it's not a telephone these days, I guess it's a mobile phone. I'm talking like 90, but in reality I'm like 23. So if it only has one speaker, it's gonna sound like shit because it can only be reproduced in mono. And if it's gonna be reproduced in stereo, it's still gonna sound like shit, but better than in mono. So just make sure that it's not leaving here, your mix is not living in the anti-phase zone. And usually it's gonna leave here if you have too many stereo things canceling each other. So the way you can do it is trying to take all the stereo things and just move them slightly 1 millisecond left, 1 millisecond right, like I did over here. As you can see, I'm not telling you bullshit. What I'm telling you, I'm actually doing. And that's why my mix is not leaving entirely on the anti-phase. If you're gonna get a few spikes here and there, it's okay, it's normal, it's not gonna sound like shit. And this mix sounds like anything but shit. Also, yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm not gonna release this instrumental to the public. I'm not gonna do that anymore because I've been thinking about what I want to do with this channel throughout this entire time while I was gone for work and whatnot. And it's like, I don't really want to focus on instrumentals anymore because that's also my side job. And I don't find it fair for my clients to pay me for this thing while I'm putting it for free right after I'm done with it. So I'm not gonna do it anymore. And that's also kind of why I stopped taking commissions. I mean, not commissions, yes, kind of commissions. Like I stopped taking a lot of clients. I'm just only working with the same clients now because really, like any kind of instrumental nowadays, I can recreate in like 10 hours. So if I get a lot of them, basically in one day I can get all of them done. I mean, I can get one of them done in one day, so it's not really a lot of pressure, or at least these days. Before it used to be a lot of pressure, but it's more like a lot of clients cannot keep up with that, right? And what I mean by that is that I get an instrumental done, but it's never going to be released out to the public. They're never going to do anything with that. They're not even ever going to listen to it because they liked it, because they only wanted to listen to the instrumental, right? Maybe they have a song that they like, but they do not like the vocals and they just like the instrumentals. They commission me to recreate an instrumental, and I know for a fact that they're never going to listen to the instrumental that I made specifically for them. So I'm just doing a lot of work for absolutely nothing, basically. Even though they may pay me, they may not pay me, I really don't give a shit about that. But at the end of the day, like, something that I'm making is not getting used, right? So it's not gonna be put out on YouTube. It's not gonna ever be put in their DAW to work themselves on the vocals, on their guitar solo, whatever they want to do with the instrumental. It's just, I make something just for nothing, basically. So that started to actually get to me after a while. And I was like, yeah, this is like pointless. Pointless? Yes. Pointless. So I stopped taking a lot of commissions. I stopped releasing instrumentals by themselves. I stopped doing all of that, and basically every kind of project that I started, I stopped for some reason, for one reason or another. So that's why my channel was like that for this long. And right now I try to revive it just to show it to you how I make instrumentals, just because I still make instrumentals, right? And maybe I will be back at doing Vocaloid covers, and like I was thinking about doing Japanese Vocaloid covers like I did like in 2016, because yeah, Japanese Vocaloid covers of like translated songs in Japanese of like rock songs or like English rock songs, they are very liked by people. And I had a few done in the past that I uploaded on SoundCloud, and over the years they reached like millions of views. I think they were like 30 million views. I had like 30 million views because at some point like I left SoundCloud for that. Then I logged back in because of the Hatsune Miku contest in 2020 or 2018. I don't remember. I think it's 2020. And I logged back in my account, and I saw that it was like, no, it was not 30 million. It was like 100 million. Yeah, it was like, it was like around 100 million of total plays, just with a bunch of songs that I had, like Japanese Vocaloid songs, Japanese Vocaloid rock songs, basically. Translated, I also should add, as I've not already added it before, right? Yeah, the people really seem to enjoy those, and I was like, yeah, after making a lot of shit that people never even heard of, because people never even put them out. So like my clients never even bothered to like actually get their side end of the job done. Like thinking of something that can actually be useful and people may actually enjoy listening to is like, yeah, I should probably like start doing that again. But I deleted all of those tracks because they were like very low quality. And when I was like participating in the Hatsune Miku contest, I was like, no, I don't want the higher ups in the Hatsune Miku industry listen to my old shit out of curiosity and listen like how shit they were, right? Especially because even the Japanese was bad. So, and they are Japanese people, right? So I couldn't be bothered to keep those songs up. So yeah, I deleted all of those. But yeah, anyway, so this is the mixing session. I know it's not very detailed, but really there is nothing to be detailed about. For the master, I decrease the volume, so because I don't have anything clipping, so I can leave everything here like this and just decrease the volume going in the master. So with this plugin, then I'm gonna have some multiband compressor, which is just a preset mastering save. I don't do anything else because I don't need to. Sometimes I just mess around with these thresholds. Some other times I do not. Sometimes it just like that because I'm like, yeah, I want to add some multiband compression. Multiband compression is basically compression applied at different bands of the frequency spectrum. So each one of these dots is a band, and you can compress a specific frequency band in a different way compared to another band, right? So you may want to compress the low end a bit more than the higher end and whatnot. So this is very complicated, right? This is more complicated than compression, of course, even though they are basically the same thing. So stay away from these ones. But if you can't bring yourself to stay back from these ones, try the presets. By trying the presets, you will not be able to hear the difference between all the presets. Trust me. You may be able to hear the difference, but you're not gonna know which one is better because they all sound quote unquote good. But what you want to try to keep in mind as best as you can is the low end. Really, that you should pay attention to the low end when you play multiband compression and use presets. Really pay attention to the low end. Like, use a filter afterwards and try to hear how the low end is getting affected. Because if you get a lot of rumble, it's basically extremely easy to fuck up the low end of a mix, really, without even trying. Like, what I mean even by without even trying is, you may not even cut the low end and also kind of the high end in the master before everything. And if you do not do this, and if you have also never cut anything that you had to cut in the mix, this is gonna sound like shit, because all the rumble that's gonna build up in the low end, you cannot hear it, but it's gonna have a very significant volume. And as I've told you before, when compressing or when distorting, those plugins will always take effect first on the loudest part of the mix. And if the loudest part is something that you cannot even hear, that's something that is so rumbly, that's like at 20 hertz, it's gonna sound like this. Now, this is very exaggerated, but let's try to dial it back. You can hear how everything starts to lose its identity, basically. I don't know why I'm trying to be poetic with it, but everything, it's kind of getting fucked. I don't really know how else to explain it. So just pay attention to the low end when you're using multiband compression and you do not know how to use multiband compression. This is a limiter. What the fuck is this? Yeah, I guess it's a limiter or something. Yeah, it's a limiter. High level, low level. Yeah, and just bringing down the high level and keeping down the low level. And this is a limiter. The more you squash this, the more it's gonna sound like a sausage. Now, if your clients release on Spotify, this and these two are gonna be your best friends. They have to collaborate because this thing is to be adjusted until this thing for the entire song only shows up to minus 14 loops in terms of volume. You're gonna thank me later, but there are certain websites, streaming websites, that if you go on the About Us or like something like about soundings or around FAQs, then look for like Alt F or press F3 in your, like Control F, I think, not Alt F, or press F3 in your keyboard and like look up for like a limiter or like something like reduction volume or not. each site is gonna tell you what they try to limit their songs to, basically like TV, like television. So every song is gonna be the same amount of volume, like it's gonna sound the same as in terms of volume, right? It's gonna sound the same as the song that you're gonna play next, the song that you played before, so that you don't have to play with the volume and so that you don't get your ears fucked. Unless you want to and listen to music at a very loud volume because you're an angry teenager. So yeah, pay attention to laughs. And the only way that you can affect laughs in your mix is just with the final limiter. So increase, decrease this until the entire song is gonna sound at -14, -16, -12 laughs according to the streaming platform that you're mixing and mastering for. And mastering should not be complicated because the complicated process is only in the mix. Mastering should only be for making sure that your mix sounds good. So you bring the mix up to volume without fucking it up. That's mastering in a nutshell. You shouldn't do like some stereo separation in the mastering. You shouldn't do something like chorusing the master, having a parallel master bus, like all those things you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't have like a 24 plugin chain in your master. That doesn't tell me that you're a good mixer, that you're a professional audio engineer. That only tells me that you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Your master should be simple. You should only have your plugins to see and to basically like monitor your mix, and you should only have plugins that regulate volumes and frequencies. Really, that's it. So EQs, compressions, limiters, and just a way to visualize the volume, the stereo, the frequency field. That's why I used this plugin right here, and I turn it on, but turn the mixing knob all the way down so that I can see my harmonics. Some people prefer to see the waveform, but I prefer to see the harmonics. And I mean, the waveform is this one right here. And yeah, basically, when you look at this, and you've been looking at the waveform of professional songs, of the original song that you're trying to recreate, of even your entire songs before, like in the past, you can basically see how better you've gotten by looking at this, just by looking at this, really. And by looking at this, you can compare your mix to the original one, your mix to a like similar mix of a similar song that you want to kind of recreate or kind of sound like. And you pay attention to the stereo field to make sure everything is in phase and everything is not out of phase. And also you make sure that your sound is nowhere clipping, your song is nowhere clipping. There are no micro clips in the song, or if there are, that's not really a problem. But if there are parts of your song that are really clipping and you cannot even hear those, and your plugins can, just make sure that you monitor, like the masters, just to monitor, bring everything up in volume without fucking it up. Really, that's all you're doing in the master. And also like adapting the mix for all the entire fucking things, like whatever. I mean, that's not really done in the master, but you can see if it's done, if the mix is proper in the master, you can see it. So yeah, that's it for this last video of the series. I don't know if I'm gonna do the same series but for different like songs. I don't know yet, but it depends. I guess it depends on whatever I feel like. And this video is already way too long. Anyway, bye.